job access. Also heard about getting more amenities in certain communities that have been historically underinvested in for those amenities, as retail, those restaurants. Also heard about, sometimes that not everywhere in Dallas looks great, that there is an urban design or there's an identity issue, that we need better design and planning in some of our areas. And lastly, about the rural and agricultural areas of Dallas that have been historically underinvested in, and how really to turn those into actual agricultural areas instead of just placeholders. So I mentioned this is a land use plan. So what is land use? So really simply, it's just about how you're using that property, right? How, is it a single family home? Is it a school? Is it a church? Is it a factory? Is it an office building? Is it kind of a combination of 14 different things where somebody's throwing axes at a bar downstairs and then all of a sudden upstairs there's apartments and there's a hotel or there's offices? So wanted to make a quick distinction here about the existing land use and the future land use. So the existing land use is, again, how that property is being used or not being used at that moment. So the existing land use could be vacant. The existing land use could be a church, could be single family homes. The future land use may be the exact same thing. It may be used today as a house, and the future land use is that it's going to be used as a house. It may be different. Again, it may be an empty big box store. They say that shouldn't be an empty big box store 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. What should the future land use for that area be? Also wanted to touch briefly about the difference between land use and zoning. So zoning, there are rules and regulations. Those are the laws, right, that regulate the different types of land uses. So you have single family homes as a land use, and then you have regulations about how big the homes can be, how much it can take up on the lot, those types of things. Just like you have rules about where factories can go and how large they can be. Again, that's determined by those zoning regulations that dictate different rules for different types of land uses and where they can go within the city. So for Forward Dallas, the way the city is thinking about our future land use, right? Putting together that map of the whole city where we understand, okay, what should the city look like, in 5 years and 20 years? How can we be intentional about how our city can grow and change in other areas, how it can stay the same? And the way that we understand this is through something called a place type. And a place type brings together land uses and certain design components that give a sense of place, right? And it can be a little abstract, but again, think about walking through a number of different neighborhoods in Dallas, right? Walking through, Buckner Terrace, Queen City, walking through Lakewood, walking through, Los Altos, those feel like a certain type of place. Walking down Lower Greenville Avenue feels like a different type of place. Just like walking through areas in Uptown or in downtown, those feel different than walking through a residential neighborhood, throughout the city. So the city has put together a number of different place types. They range from the regional open space or park, it's the Trinity, White Rock Lake, Mountain Creek Lake, to the urban core, which is downtown, areas of uptown. There's a couple of different residential place types. That's the rural residential, and we have a traditional residential, which those are the neighborhoods built usually in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's a lot of single family. There might be some churches or some schools in there. And we have the blended residential, which includes a lot of single family, and again, the churches and the schools, but we'll occasionally have some, a duplex here or there, or, a two-story apartment building that's on the edge of that neighborhood. Think of it as the difference between, some areas like the M streets, some areas of South Dallas or West Dallas that are a little bit older and have that blended place type, or that blended, fabric of what makes them up. You have the urban residential, which is now, those are more apartments, right? It includes more retail, includes more amenities because there are more people there. This is not a neighborhood that has a lot of single family homes. In fact, it's a neighborhood that might not have any single family homes. Then we get into the commercial spaces where we have, it starts off with the neighborhood commercial spaces, right? The the stuff that you might be able to walk to or you might be able to walk around. You know, it isn't a big center, doesn't have you know, huge buildings, doesn't have, you know, big apartment buildings or anything like that. It's more of a neighborhood commercial space, like Lower Greenville or Bishop Arts. The medium commercial spaces, those are a little bit more intense. They have, you know, not only is it just bigger buildings, but you're going to have more jobs, you're going to have more retail, you're going to have more, you know, restaurants, you're going to have more housing that's associated with it as well. We have two different types of industrial place types. One is more the industrial hub. That's an intense industrial area. Then we have more like the flex industrial or innovation, where you do have some industrial in there, but kind of like the design district, where it mixes in a couple of other things. Yes, it has warehouses, but it has some other things as well. Then we have the regional commercial spaces. That's the Galleria, that's the Cedars, that's Deep Ellum. That's these big, intense regional commercial areas. You know, where in the neighborhood commercial, you might have some apartments or a hotel. In the regional commercial, now you have apartments and a hotel, and they all have a view. Then we have the institutional campuses or the special purpose areas. Those are areas where you have one main driver of that type of place. An area like Parkland, or an area where you have a concentration of, you know, it's an academic, you know, concentration. It's some of Dallas College's campuses, right? That is the driving force behind what that place feels like. And lastly, as I said, you have the urban core. That's downtown, that's uptown. You know, walking through downtown definitely feels like a different place than walking through a traditional residential neighborhood. So right now, the city is in the process of putting together that future place type map. The way that we are doing that is through input from, it's a website that we use called Social Pinpoint. And Social Pinpoint allows you to navigate through the city and drop a certain point in a community or on a street or in a neighborhood and say, I think it should be this type of place. And it may be, I want this community to stay the type of place it is, or you may say, I want this to, you know, this is a corridor that doesn't have any commercial in it. I want this to be that neighborhood commercial space because we need more retail in this area. And we're going to drop in that link to Social Pinpoint, both in the chat, and I believe we're going to be following up with it. So if you have opinions about place types or, you know, different factors or design and land uses within the city, please go ahead and indicate that through that place type map. Okay, so what happens when the city adopts Forward Dallas as a plan? So a couple of things. First of all, that future place type map. When someone wants to change the zoning on a property, right now there may be an area plan or a neighborhood plan, or there may not be. When we adopt Forward Dallas, there will be a future place type plan for the entirety of the city. So everywhere within the city will have identified what this should be. And if you want to change your zoning, you would have to go in and say, this is the reason, you know, this is how it complies with that future place type. You know, that it makes sense that the big box store turns into X, Y, and Z because it matches that future place type. Also, there will be some areas of Dallas where that future place type that has been identified by the community, it may not match the current zoning. And in those cases, the city would go out and proactively change the zoning to accommodate what that future place type would be. Lastly, the last two things. So there are certain things that will be land use policies, right? Policies in those different types of places that the city will need to pursue. In some cases, that involves changing our development code or zoning to be rewritten in certain instances to accommodate and reflect the place types that the community and the city has explored and has indicated that those places and those place types should be, again, intentionally where we're going to build for the next 5, 10, 20 years. All right, so at this point, I'm going to quiet myself down a little bit. Know that there's totally other people in this room who have a lot of opinions. Quick ground rules. Again, be prepared to share your thoughts, be respectful, right? You know, try to keep your comments to within our discussion. And again, if you want to drop in some comments in the chat, you can do that as well. How we're going to go about asking the questions. A wonderful co-pilot Sandra Bowie is on the line with us, and she's going to manage that process. The way that we're going to do it is you're going to raise your hand. You're going to indicate, "Hey, Sandra, I've got a question." She's going to recognize you. You ask your question. We may have a couple of people that want to ask the questions, and so you may end up, um, you know, being the second or third. Again, be respectful. Wait your turn. And be definitely aware if you don't answer any questions or ask any questions, Sandra's going to call you out and ask you to ask some questions, most definitely. So again, the two general questions that we've thought about for nonprofits that work within the city of Dallas is, how does land use affect your organization? And also, when you think about your organization, when you think about its places and its campuses and your mission over the next 10 years or 20 years, how is that going to change? And does any of those changes, does any of your planning need to be reflected in ForwardDallas? With that, again, our general questions, but we're open to having any other questions that you have about ForwardDallas. With that, I will open up the floor.
Thank you. And I have a back room that tells me there aren't any hands raised at this time. Please don't be afraid to start it off. Shanika, I know that you are not shy. Valerie, I know you're not shy. So let's have a land use conversation.
Okay, I'll start. I'm Valerie Ballard with Operation Tiny House. And my question would be, I am so interested in looking into the social pinpoint to see what we can do to help further our mission for our nonprofit. We provide affordable housing for veterans who have experienced homelessness. And one of the challenges that we're facing is land use and the size of the dwellings that we'd like to offer. Currently, we're in the University Hills Educational Corridor. Um, we're looking to acquire the about 11 acres of land and to assist our veterans and build homes there. Well, currently the zoning is R7, which we're told those lots are about 7,500 square feet, much too large. For us, we could assist more veterans if we could get a plan development zoning so that we could put micro homes somewhere between 150 to 200 square feet. So I'm very interested in seeing what we need to do to get zoning so that we could move forward with building those affordable housing.
Yeah, Valerie, thank you for the comment on the question. So part of that gets to how does the city change our underlying zoning or rules and regulations for different land uses to better accommodate the issues that everyone is facing. And so specifically on this point, the city of Dallas, our zoning code was written in 1989 and based on, frankly, thought, the best land use thought from the 60s, right? So tiny homes and that concept did not exist back then. And so part of it is changing our underlying zoning to be more reflective of current development trends, like tiny homes, and understanding how that can play a role in that housing affordability crisis. And so again, part of that is changing our underlying zoning and then identifying areas in which that type of housing would be a type of housing that would fit within that character in that community, identifying that in the future place type. So that way, we can either create some zoning for it or change the underlying rules so that it's easier for that type of development to occur. Thank you.
Can you tell us how long is this gonna take? You know, you guys are gonna look at this, but how long is it gonna take to act on getting this zoning changed?
So
Mm.
the Forward Dallas plan, that's what we're working on throughout the summer and probably into the fall. And then that would include, when it's adopted, then that future place type designation, where we've said this is the type of place that we think the entirety of the city should be. It should be this type of place here, this type of place there. Um, then after that, it would be either the city going through, and we shortly after the comprehensive plan, we will be rewriting our development code or zoning, and so changing those rules to accommodate things like tiny homes. If your timetable is sharper or needs to be quicker than that, and because again, that process of rewriting the zoning code is probably another year-long process, then for your Pacific zoning case, you would again have you can use this process to help provide the vision for that area, and if that vision matches your development, then that's something that you could apply to change the zoning on.
Okay, so I heard, did you say the fall of 23?
That's when we're hoping to move forward with adopting the future place type map and adopting Forward Dallas as an update for the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
To be clear,
Yeah.
not the zoning, not the zoning.
Yes.
Yeah, if you are looking to change the zoning on an individual property, Forward Dallas will not change the zoning on any property, but it will apply the guidance on how to change that zoning, either through a specific landowner saying they would like to change it, or the community and the city agreeing that the current zoning does not match what the vision for that area, the future place type would be.
Okay.
Thank you, Valerie. I have Susanna is next.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susanna Brown. I'm with Friends of Bachman Lake, located in Northwest Dallas. We're directly next to, the lake is directly next to Love Field. And my question, first of all, I wanted to thank the previous individual that asked the question, because I had similar ones regarding timing. But and just as a follow-up from what was said, if the property is owned by the city, how will the process work? Is it the same? If a property is
Yes.
owned by the city and there's a rezoning that is needed, is it the same process that you were alluding to before?
Yes, it is a very similar process. The minutia of how it's applied for can be a little bit different, but the process would be the same. If the city owns the property or a private owner owns the property, and they apply to change the zoning, they would go through the same process. That would include does this match the future place type for this area?
Correct, but the city wouldn't have an incentive to rezone. So let me give you a very specific example. So from an environmental equity perspective, there were decisions that were made in the past in terms of zoning that affected Northwest Dallas. Immediately next to Bachman Lake Park is a major bulk trash transfer station for the city, the Northwest Transfer Station. I mean, it basically abuts Bachman Lake Park. And we, as a community, don't feel that that is necessarily the location that the city of Dallas should maintain as, as our area grows and we have largest number of children under 5 in the area.
Figure out what to do with it.
Basically bulk trash locations. So do we initiate the request, Patrick, or is that something that the city does as you're looking at environmental equity, Or would the Department of Sanitation have to submit that rezoning request?
So there's a little bit to break out for that specific example. And I'm going to begin at the beginning, because it's where you begin. So part of that is understanding the difference between the existing land use and the future land use. And so the existing land use may be that the transfer station. That might not be what the community desire for the future land use to be. And so part of that is, okay, how do you create a future place type for that area to say, this is really what we want it to be? And again, the city is going to be involved in that process. Sanitation will be involved in that process because, they do need to, do recycling and pick up garbage and those types of things. And so the city would definitely be involved in that process of identifying that future place type. You identify that future place type, you put it on the map, you say, this is what we want it to be. It may not be a transfer station. It may be a transfer station. Then the city could initiate a zoning change to say that we had a conversation with the community. We looked at our logistics and figured out that there's a better location for that transfer station. And so understanding that and understanding the timeline to move that transfer station, the city could go about applying to change the zoning for that area to match what that future place type would be. And again, that is a conversation that it's not just going to be with planning and urban design and Bachman Lake or the Friends of Bachman Lake. That's going to be a conversation that would involve other departments to understand, again, their logistics and their needs. Does that answer the question, or at least give you kind of the layout of how that would happen?
Yes, and we've participated, and the community as a whole has participated in the sessions with the community and noted that. I just didn't know if there was another method that we needed to make sure we had to follow to get those requests logged. It's unclear to me, where do I go in the ForwardDallas to see if the request for what the future land use should be has been logged somewhere?
So there's two ways you can go about that. You can email me and
Okay.
I can tell you directly, right? That's one way. The other way though is going to that social pinpoint map and going to that area, and if you see your comment, great. If you don't, drop that pinpoint in there, put that comment in there, and then follow up and say, Patrick, can you make sure that got in there? And I can say, yes, we can go ahead and take a look. And then if you have other members of your community, they can upvote that comment to give it, to amplify that voice, if it makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick.
You're welcome.
And I think in the chat, the social pinpoint has been posted and other information as well. I don't see any other hands back room. If you could help me, I don't see any other hands. Annie, thank you for joining us. Amy, thank you for joining us. Raul, would you like to add to the conversation?
Oh, Sandra, this is Tracy Wallace. I had my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tracy.
Not at
Thank
all.
you.
Not at
I'm sorry, dear.
all. No, not at all. So I just wanted to piggyback on a couple of things that have already been mentioned, and I put it in the chat also, is that environmental justice and economic justice go hand in hand. And I've got a couple of questions there. Is it possible to do an end run around state preemption and create rent controls basically in Dallas, because we are not, we don't have enough housing for our frontline workers, and it doesn't look like we're getting anywhere fast on that. And then my second question that I also have there is that the policy on batch plants, concrete batch plants, there's always the excuse that they need to be close to where the development's being done, but it doesn't seem to be that there are concrete batch plants and, Preston Hollow, when there's development being done in Preston Hollow, the batch plants are in lower income areas. So I'd like to see if there's a way on land usage to put a a radius that they have to be within the community where that is benefiting from the development.
Yeah, Tracy, thank you for the questions. So I'll start with the last one about batch plants. The city is currently working through the batch plant issue, but I think it's something also, as we're talking about different policies that Forward Dallas can promote or can address, to think comprehensively about those batch plants. To your point about the radius, as we're working through that, how we are equitable in understanding where those batch plants can go. And to your first point about housing, so at 11 o'clock, we had one specifically with the housing sector, or another, listening session with the housing sector that the director of housing was on as well. And to your point about the rent control, that's where Forward Dallas, rent control is not a land use policy. It's not a place type, but it is affected by those things. And so that's where working hand in hand with housing, where we can address the land use issue. We can address it by building more housing throughout Dallas, giving more access to that housing, giving different types of housing, and then our housing department can work with creating unique housing policy to address whether it's rent control, whether it's home ownership, whether it's community land trust, mechanisms that they can employ hand in hand with us, saying we need more housing, more types of housing, more access to housing. We'll address the land use component of it. Housing can come in and address other components of it. So it's making sure that we're all on the same page and making sure that we're all working together, yes, we are working together with housing very closely, not only in our plan, but on their plan as well.
And Patrick, I just wanted just specifically on rent control. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Gillis. I'm also with Planning and Urban Design. The state doesn't allow us to, for there to be rent control within the state. So that's one of the challenges that we find. And, there are a lot of ideas that we hear, particularly as they relate to housing, and local jurisdictions are limited by what is available in the toolbox oftentimes from the state. So we're very limited there, but I just wanted to, just for that specific recommendation, that is a challenge that we have at the state level.
Yeah, it's not the only issue we have a challenge on the state level with. There are a number of innovative things that Dallas that cities in Texas can't do. So yeah.
Thank you. And I know that we also have other representatives from other sectors, and it's okay for us to open up the conversation. So I see Scotty Smith is on the call. So Scotty, please add to the land use conversation.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Um, I actually have nothing to add at this moment. I'm just kind of listening and observing. One of the critical things, and hearing Valerie speak and the other person who spoke about just in dealing with land use and zoning issues. I know oftentimes we talk with planning and urban design to try to move some of those things along, but real high level, it's on our city officials. You're gonna have to reach out to some of your commissioners, your CPC, your zoning commissioners, and have conversations with your council people in that area to support and get behind whatever it is you're trying to do. And looking at plans like Forward Dallas and any area plans and mastered land use plans that the city may have for that specific area, and thinking about how what you're looking to do on your property or on a specific property, how it fits into that long-term plan. And so this team here at the city and a lot of the task force that they've put together oftentimes come together through community input, through community just insight, and come together with the plan that says, hey, look, this is how we expect for things to be in our neighborhoods long term. And so ultimately, we have to think about what that looks like and how our, kind of development that we're looking at, how it fits into the grand scheme of things. And sometimes developments don't get pushed along because it doesn't fit into the big picture. And so, it's a headache sometimes, but let's think about what it looks like long term for the area that you're in, and how it could impact whatever those plans are. So that's really, that's all I have to add on that. Just kind of, hearing some of the issues and the problems that some of the nonprofits may have in addressing these things. So.
Thank you, Scotty. And also, the plan commissioner is also someone that I think our communities need to develop and cultivate relationships with so that they know the concerns intimately about your neighborhood. I don't see any other hands. I want to open it up to the next question on this is the nonprofit. Oh, yes.
Excuse me. Hi, this is Jessica Jolly. I did have my hand raised as well.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica.
Hi, I just have a quick question. I attended the listening session in South Dallas, Fair Park, and I was just curious about the social pinpoint. I know we actually did a hands-on activity where we placed stickers on the map. I'm just curious about the online electronic version. Has those particular stickers, have they been incorporated into what's on the pinpoint on the My Social site? Because I see some sort of designations, but it doesn't look like nearly as many stickers as we placed on those particular maps.
Thank you for the question, Jessica. So a couple of things on that. So if you are on that social pinpoint map and you zoom out, you do see a lot of pins in South Dallas that are reflected of a number of the comments that came from that listening session on the 8th of December. I want to say that we were out there. But that meeting on the 8th was kind of twofold. So one, it was that to gather information about future place types for Forward Dallas. It was also a meeting to have a conversation about the area plan for South Dallas and Fair Park, where some of the comments are more directed or better impactful for that area plan than for the place type. So it's talking about some of the comments might have been, more about public safety or about lighting or about different components that really weren't a place type, but were very important for that neighborhood, for that area plan. And so a lot of the comments are added in there, but the comments that aren't reflected in that social pinpoint map are going to be reflected in the area plan because they may be comments that are less about land use and place type and more about the area plan or an effort that the area plan team is doing.
Thank you for sharing that. And one follow-up question, you may have covered this, but can you talk about how the pinpoint site and the comments, how will that influence the ultimate decision made by City Council? How will this information be used?
Yeah, so when you drop a pinpoint on that map and you say, I'd like it to be this type of place, or I want it to be, stay this or change this, city staff takes a look at that comment. And if it's indicative of the future place type, so if they say, yes, this is, the city has identified this type of place for this neighborhood, and the comment says, I would like this to stay this type of neighborhood, then that place type stays the same. We've noted, we included in our engagement report that we would send to council, and then it goes to council. If it's a comment that says, this neighborhood, I want it to be an urban core, and we say, well, no, that's Queen City. That that's not, most people in Queen City don't want Queen City to become the urban core. So we will still note that comment, but we wouldn't change the future place type map to be reflected of that comment. And then ultimately, the entirety of that place type map goes to council. That because council again is the voice of the people, they would ultimately adopt that place type map, which they may have additional comments and changes to make on that place type map. So Jessica, did that answer the question?
It did. Thank you. And
Thank you.
Jessica.
it just also sounds like, I think you mentioned this earlier, that we need to have conversations with our city council members and such to ensure that what they are voicing and how they vote reflects, really the concerns and the thoughts of the constituents. So thank you for that.
Yes, and thank you for participating in the South Dallas Fair Park area plan process. And we will be coming back to the community in early March, so stay tuned for that. Raul, I have you are next. Raul, I can't hear you. Is there anyone else that's in the chat? I don't see any hand raised. Susanna, would you have another comment, please?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Jessica, for your question. So from the Bachman listening session, I got on the pinpoint map and looked, and none of the Bachman comments are in the map. So I don't know who I can follow up with your group to.
Thank you. You just have.
Okay.
We got you. We got you. Thank you.
I also put that in the
Chat.
in the chat. So you should have my email from the sign up. Feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Laura?
can definitely follow up and have that, take a look at what the comments are and see which ones needed to be added if they're not there. Yes.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of concern in the area about the industrial corridor along, Denton, Harry Hines, and the fact that we basically go from industrial to residential. The conversation is generally that the best practice would be that there's some level of a buffer zone between industrial and
Yes, ma'am.
residential, which we don't have in this area. So, but I don't see any of those comments in there. So we can follow up later. Thank you.
And Lawrence can answer more about the social pinpoint. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So no, thank you for that question. And during the last few months, as we were developing this mapping, the first phase was just to kind of get feedback on the place types in general. So the listening session, which was actually like we call it a visioning meeting, we were just showing and presenting those place types to the community and getting feedback from there. But what we can do is go back to those comments because those are more for staff to see which place types made sense to proceed forward with the map. But I think there were some instances where some of those geographical comments might have been on some of those boards. So we can definitely go back and make sure that we get your comments onto the map.
Great. And then we are going to move on to Ricardo Rodriguez. And then Raul will come back to you if you're still there.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Ricardo Rodriguez. I work with Dallas College. And as you probably know, we have several campuses and centers located all over the county. I am particularly interested in Southeast Dallas, where we have one of our campuses there in the Pleasant Grove area. Can you tell us a little bit of how this Forward Dallas is going to impact Southeast Dallas, Pleasant Grove, and those neighborhoods? I think a few years ago, we fell short from becoming an opportunity zone. So I was wondering how this is going to make an impact in that area. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Rodriguez. So first of all, we'd love to sit down and have a conversation with you and Dallas College about that area. So for that area, Southeast Dallas or Pleasant Grove, how Forward Dallas is going to affect that area is essentially that community comes together and has opinions about the future of that area, the future type of places, what Buckner Boulevard is going to look like, or what Samuel is going to look like, right? What some of those neighborhoods are going to look like, what role Dallas College's campus out there plays. Those visioning comments, right, about what the future of that area should be, get adopted as part of Forward Dallas. And if it gets adopted as part of Forward Dallas, that's where it's that visioning, that intentionality about what Pleasant Grove should look like in 20 years. But again, I'd love to follow up with a conversation with you about Dallas College's role in Southeast Dallas or on that campus, because I think that would be a very productive conversation.
And I just want to add, from an engagement piece, Pleasant Grove has been difficult for us to get input from the area. And so I would love to continue that conversation or be included on that conversation to talk about strategies on how we can get a stronger voice from Pleasant Grove. Thank you. Ken Smith, thank you. Come on in.
Thank you. Patrick, could you give us just in general the difference between area plans and the consolidated land use plan and the timetables for the completion of both?
Yes. So the city of Dallas for a number of years has engaged in doing area or neighborhood plans. Sometimes those area and neighborhood plans are just visioning. Sometimes they involve land use components, sometimes they involve other things. So Forward Dallas will take those previous area plans and neighborhood plans, and if they're still applicable, incorporate them into the future place type map and incorporate them into Forward Dallas, which again, Forward Dallas, we're looking at the fall for that adoption. Any neighborhood or area plans that are currently going on, again, Forward Dallas is going to be informed by those practices or by those area plans or neighborhood plans. And if they are completed before Forward Dallas, great, we can capitalize on that. If they are completed after Forward Dallas, there'll be an amendment to Forward Dallas or an update to that future place type map. So let's say we've talked about Pleasant Grove, so we go to Pleasant Grove and we say, South Buckner Boulevard should be this type of place. And we include that as a future type of place. And then 20 years from now, 10 years from now, the community says it doesn't match the vision that we still have or that we are maturating towards. So we would do an area plan for that area. And then that area plan would then be an amendment to Forward Dallas and would update and amend the future place type map.
Is there a place on the website for the city and the planning department to keep track of the progress of respective area plans as they are being developed?
Yes. There is, so all of the area plans that the city is currently engaging in, they are on their website. Honestly, they could probably be a little bit easier to find, but they are on Planning and Urban Design's website.
All right, thank you.
And I can also take responsibility that the South Dallas Fair Park Area Plan website does need to be updated. So I will be working on that.
Okay.
Thank you. All righty. Go ahead.
Sandra, I had a comment, but I really would rather wait to do it at the end. I was already on the previous meeting. I don't want to take up, other people's time, but I do have a comment near the end, if you don't mind.
You know what? I don't have any other hands raised, so you have the floor.
Okay, this is just my comment. I'm a former city employee. It was long ago, but I've been through planning processes like this many, 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 many times. My suggestion to make this different and make this stick is that we have someone in charge of this plan at least for the next 10 years. The reason I say that is because the city council will change every 2 years. the city manager probably will change in a year or so. 6 years is generally the time frame for a city manager. Department heads will change. We're going to be constantly changing. And what has happened in previous plans is we may have done a fantastic plan that wasn't implemented or was partially implemented, but there's no person, no entity, no champion that drives it through to its fruition in spite of all the changes in leadership. And if we could put that out there clearly, that would be the one single different thing about the previous plans. Have a champion 10, 15, 20 years, no matter how the city changes.
Yep. It's a astute point that I think can best come from a former city employee.
I've been there, I've done that, I've been through so many. And the second B part of that would be implementation. Okay, we do this plan and it's most people buy off on it and it's good or whatever, it's acceptable. Now we have to implement. But what happens in reality is a single council person or a developer may come in with an idea or a project, and that project is going to bring X number of jobs and a lot of economic development in a particular area that has not had it for a while. The project may or may not go against what's in the Forward Dallas plan. I guarantee you the development plan will get done in spite of what this says if we're going to follow history. But if we're going to spend all this time doing it, getting all these people to give their great time and effort, then it needs to be for something and it needs to stand against things that are opposed to it if the opposition is worthy. If it's not worthy, we shouldn't be implementing it. So that's hard to do. That takes a real high level person to do. But if we don't do that this time, I think you're going to have diminishing returns on future projects that require so much community engagement. People are going to say, well, where's my 2 cents? Who's leading this? And it's a real deficit in the structure of the city and makeup of the city of Dallas that we don't have continuous leadership when people change. All right, I'm through with that. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for hanging out with us today, Mr. Smith. And I believe that I received word, and my back room can confirm that the housing policy briefing has been canceled for tomorrow. So state due to the weather. So I'm just getting that alert. And so we will keep you posted on that. Raul, come and join the conversation.
Can you hear me? Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, I just hearing what Ken just said was refreshing because I was thinking the same thing, and I just like to just expand on that. If not a champion, I think, and again, as a former city employee myself, if not a champion, we definitely need to put it into place policy that provides those parameters, right? That says that, hey, that if a community, whether it's an area plan or whether it's Forward Dallas or whatever plan is that we're working on, that it be given some concrete parameters that allows it to execute towards that point, that starting point and that ending point. Now, somewhere in there, yes, that there is a change and there's an outcry from the community, or there's something that for some reason the city has to amend that. That yeah, there obviously has to be a process, right? That's democracy. But sometimes we as a city we come up with all these plans, and as Ken said, partially get it instituted. Some of it, we forget about it with time because of change of leadership or just the way the direction that the city is moving. And yet there's a lot of engagement that comes on. So I know that there's a lot of work that you guys are putting on, but from the community's perspective, one thing that keeps coming up is, man, plan after plan after plan after plan. And as you guys are aware, out here in West Dallas, we're trying to get to that point to where we only have a plan for our community. And we work with you guys with PUD to come out and educate. And I'm glad that we have the nonprofits on this call. This is more of a comment. They have a captive audience, right? Because they have a either geographical area that they serve, or they have certain individuals that have needs that they meet. My encouragement would be to partner with these organizations so you can get very granular information about what it is that they want. Someone earlier mentioned something about an event that they had in Bachman Lake, and I know in South Dallas. I know you guys came out to West Dallas. And it frustrated me a little bit when it was pointed out that you have this online tool that you can put your input on, and the first thing that I thought about is, well, what happened to the stuff that we talked about when you guys came out? But then what about the other 30,000 neighbors that live in West Dallas? And as we all know, we have digital deserts, we have economic situations that don't allow people to have access to the internet, and so far and so forth. So partnering, and I'm sorry about the background noise, they're working on stuff outside because of this weather. Partnering with these entities that have an audience that they can that they work with and that they provide services to, but they also educate and inform. I think it would be a great opportunity to really get granular information and more concrete information to make sure that these plans stick for the longevity. But yeah, I would definitely echo what Ken is saying, that not only do we need a champion, and I think a champion would be nice, but I think if the policies are put in place, that at the end of the day, any policy requires a vote, then that means that you can't fool with it. And I'll use that word fool with it until it gets implemented due to what the community and what was agreed on with the partnership with the city and its leadership and its elected leadership to make sure that it gets fulfilled. And that'll be the end of my comment for today.
Raul and Ken, both thank you for your comments. Yeah, it is difficult to say from a city perspective your voice matters, to then have it not feel like it matters because you gave your opinion and you don't see fruition of it, right? The city hasn't always done a great job of that type of stuff. I mentioned previous neighborhood and area plans, and we did some great efforts with a lot of those. Some of those were officially adopted ones, other ones weren't officially adopted, and more guiding principle type of stuff. And so, all of that 2 decades of work can be very frustrating from a community's perspective sometimes when you don't see those results happen. Raul, I mean, yeah, we've known you for a couple of years. You've been telling me the same thing for a couple of years, even before I worked for the city, right? It's not changing, right? The conversation we have in West Dallas is that we know what to do. A lot of it is about making sure it's implementable and moving forward of how we're going to accomplish some of those goals. So again, both of y'all, thank you, Raul and Ken, thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Andrea, would you like to add to the conversation regarding plans?
Just real briefly, because I hear your frustration, and as a planner, I have similar frustrations. And so I think what we're working on from a department, and really I see the planning and urban design department, the entire department being a champion for these plans. In partnership with the communities. And when I say communities, it's the big community. and really being a champion for the plans that get adopted. It was brought up that we have plans, some plans that are adopted, some that don't get adopted. It hasn't been clear what that means in the past and what that process is. That is one of the things that we want to work on, is really being clear in the planning department about what it means to have an adopted plan, how you go about that, how they get implemented, and really formalizing that process much more than it has been. Because, you know, we've got area plans, we have neighborhood plans, we have reports, we have studies, we have all of these things that are called plans, but they do work differently. And we need to be better about being clear about how they work. And not just pulling down another plan when another issue comes up. So we very much want to formalize that process. And really, there is the policy. It is a matter of making it a very consistent and formalized process that, like in other jurisdictions, you don't really have to think about, because that's set in place and then you follow that plan. We also have not done a good job about following up with those implementation measures, as you all have said. We do plans and then we don't come back in with a rezoning in areas where we said that there are land use conflicts. We need to start doing that. So a couple of the things that we're working on is updating the zoning code so we have better zoning tools. And then two, identifying through those plans where we need to rezone and calendaring out when that can happen. Because that hasn't been the consistent pattern in the past. So we need to really formalize that process better. And hopefully through formalizing that process better, we'll start as a city getting more and more used to that's just what we do. As opposed to sort of reinventing the wheel every time we go out and do a plan. Because, you know, to be fair to community, it gets very frustrating.
Let me just say this one thing, Andrea. It was a pleasure meeting you and talking with you at the South Dallas Cultural Center. I don't know if you remember talking, but it was very nice. And I want to give a compliment because I know you don't usually get it from me. You get beat up. Not you, Andrea, but anybody at the city. I've usually come beating up folks, but I have seen that the zoning and planning department has listened. I've seen it and know that you have, and your intentions are good. It's at the levels above you where we're not getting the message through. And it's because it becomes more of a political arena above the department head level. So we have to work on that. And I think the community and the neighborhoods and nonprofits on the phone need to work to, to put some plans together to make sure this sticks. One thing I want to comment on is when we put the original housing plan together in 2018, it was passed unanimously by the council. There were even cheers and standing ovations. And here, 4 years later, after another review, the consultant said you really never had a plan in the first place. So it says that at the policy level, the people making the final decisions are lacking the full scope of understanding that's needed in order to legislate well. And we have to educate our council people as well about what, and our city managers and things like that. Not saying that they aren't educated, but it needs to be continuous. My last thought is that original plan was tailor-made for high opportunity areas and trickled down to the low opportunity areas. It was the absolute converse of what it should have been. We now recognize that. But one good thing that did come out of the housing policy was that there were supposed to be dollars for repairs in low opportunity areas. And it didn't make, I didn't think that was so good an idea 4 years ago as I do now, because what changed was the valuation increased tremendously between those two times. And it's a new world. If we were able to get $30,000 to $50,000 in repairs to houses instead of 5 or 10, because inflation would wipe out $5,000 worth of repairs, and you can't do anything. You can't even paint a house for $5,000. If we were able to get 50, then we could repair so much of the broken stock in South Dallas far cheaper than we can to do a bill, which is at a minimum now is $200,000. So that's a tactical thing that we can do if someone puts some intention on it. I guarantee that's my last stall. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie, would you like to jump back into the conversation?
Yes, and Andrea, I think I came down and met with you this year, right? Okay, I do remember that. All right, and I want to thank you too for your input. One of the points I like to talk about is that, like, we have a development that's not far from where we are at the corner of Camp Wisdom and University Hills. Well, that development has already gone through zoning for mixed use, and why is it that we would have to come in and or um, re-engage with the city about zoning that's already been approved in that area, right? So it's been told to us that, okay, you're going to have to go through all this zoning and you're going to have to prove why you need this zoning to be up. But if there's a development that's nearby, that's close, that's already gone through that process, my concern is that why are we reinventing the wheel and having to do that?
Valerie, so part of that is understanding how to rewrite our development code so not everyone has to go and ask for their zoning to be changed. Over and over and again, and like to your point of, okay, well, if we've already said it's good for the community here, right next door, should it also be good for the community? So part of that is rewriting the zoning so that less areas have to go through that zoning process. And also be cognizant that there's different concerns in different communities as well. But yeah, part of that is changing the zoning code so that we don't have to do a PD every time anybody wants to vote anything in Dallas.
We're coming to you're welcome, Valerie. Thank you. We're coming to the close of our time together during the lunch hour, but I wanted to just raise up Tracy's question in the comment, Patrick, that says, is there anything long-term plan to bring together employment and logistics to into the city south of I-30?
So like distributions, sorry, is it like
That's fine.
distribution centers?
No, any good
just-
employment other than that? I mean, it seems we're so focused on logistics, but what about some other employment that has real advancement and that can bring up the whole community by being there?
Yeah, so two parts to that question. One is the part that we can talk about with land use policies, right? Which is creating future place types in Southern Dallas that are set to say this should be a location for high employment, an employment center, and identifying those types of places throughout Southern Dallas. The second part is working with economic development and other departments to do the non-land use policy side of it, whether that's incentives or abatements or however it can be put together, is how do you attract those businesses? The land use policy is how you get those things a little bit more shovel ready so it's easier for them to come in, and then working with other city departments to understand the different side of that economics that allows them to come in.
Thank you, Patrick. Patrick, you have any closing remarks for us this afternoon? I just want to thank everyone again for joining us. And our next listening session is on Friday. Oh, Mr. Baker has his hand raised. All right, Mr. Baker. We're still there's no audio, Mr. Baker. I'm terribly sorry. All righty. Okay, Patrick, when's the next listening session?
I believe we have 3 more listening sessions. One is on environmental justice, one is more for developers, and one is for businesses and small businesses. We can drop the times and the links to those listening sessions here in the chat. I do, again, just want to echo what Sandra said. Thank everyone for attending. Appreciate the conversation and the input. And even if there, you didn't have a question, if you didn't provide the input, just know that that door is open. Where if you have it down the road, my door is open. Sandra, the planning and urban design's door is open for you to come in and have those discussions. So thank you, everyone. Stay warm. Go outside and throw a snowball. We don't get that many opportunities to do that here in Dallas.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
These have been good sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.